All right, well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Doesn't sound like you're quite awake yet. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Excellent. Welcome to Gettysburg National Military Park. My name is Andrew. I'm one of the interpreters here with the park. My official title is that I'm an education technician, so I'm a little different than the park rangers that are usually giving these tours. But what that means is that I work with schools mostly in the spring and in the fall, and once in a while in the summertime they let me come out and do public programs. That being said, this program that we're about to do is a beefed-up version of one of our school programs. Ooh. So we're going to be following today in the footsteps of the 15th Alabama Infantry, or about as close as we can get due to the grasses and the plants and the trees and all that sort of thing. I know battle walks historically have gone through the grasses. I walked out into the field, or not quite into the field, the other day, and the grass would be over my head. It's 6-7 foot tall out there, so I'm not going to do that to you all. That being said, I do recommend that you wear bug spray on this walk. We have quite a lot of ticks that call the park home, and they're looking for a host as you are moving through the park. Please wear bug spray. I would recommend maybe a little sunscreen on the top of the ears, just lightly. Definitely bring water with you. Today we're going to be hiking one way in the vicinity of about 2 miles. So it is truly a battle hike. This is going to be more of an experiential program to put you in their shoes, to put you in their footsteps. So be prepared for this walk and bring water. I know the 15th Alabama, and we're going to talk about this, didn't have any water for this walk on a hotter day, but I do recommend please bring some water. I hear the bug sprayer is going. Thank you for heeding the advice. Excellent. So for this program, we're going to be mostly on trail. There are a couple of spots where it's loose gravel, where it's loose rock. Please be careful when we are climbing and moving over those surfaces. We will be on the road for 2 segments. Please be aware of cars. They aren't always looking for people. Usually they're driving around and go, ooh, a cannon. So they're not quite looking for you. Please be aware of your surroundings on this hike. One last thing I'll warn about. One of the trails that we're going on is known to have snakes on it. Please be aware of the snakes. Don't step on the snake. We'll leave the snakes to do their thing and get out of our way. That being said, I think we're good to go, safety and announcement-wise. So good morning, everyone, again, and welcome to Gettysburg. Today's walk, a little bit more on the experiential side in the footsteps of the 15th Alabama Infantry Regiment. These men from Alabama they hail from that southeastern corner of the state. And my graphic is way too small for the size of the crowd we have today, so you'll just have to kind of bear with me as I point to that bottom corner of Alabama. That is where these soldiers are from. That is where they hail from, for the most part. Not everybody, but the majority of them, kind of from these about 5 counties in southeastern Alabama. The regiment will form up. They'll form into their regiment. They'll march north, and by the time that June of 1863 rolls around, they are marching toward Gettysburg. As the sun rises on the morning of July 2nd, 1863, 162 years ago, these soldiers are far off to our west, about 24 miles west of us. And as the sun is not quite up, these soldiers are called into line to begin their march here. We'll follow more on that as we get down to our next stop. But before we go there, we are meeting at the Alabama State Monument. Take a look at the art on that memorial. Today's program, we are going to be going in the footsteps of the 15th, but we are using one man's account. We're going to be following in the memory of Colonel William Oates. We're following in his memory. Well, what does that mean? It means that we're following several different accounts that he gave throughout his life. We're going to follow his after-action battle report, if you will. That comes out in August of 1863. We're going to be following some letters that he wrote in the 1880s, recalling his actions as he's trying to grapple with what happened here at Gettysburg as he talks to the commander of the 2nd United States Sharpshooters. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. We're going to be following him through his 1905 memoir of his actions during the American Civil War. So we're going to watch his memory and how it transforms and how it plays in with the other people who were here. But the first piece of memory that we see, and it's physical, is that monument. Constructed in 1933 by the United Daughters of the Confederacy, put here on the battlefield at Gettysburg to commemorate the sons of Alabama who came here and sacrificed maybe not only their lives, but maybe they gave up a piece of them. Maybe they suffered from the experience here. They would call that PTSD. They don't talk about that with the Civil War, but have no doubt these people that fought here were heavily affected by this mentally after the war. I have to find my spot in my notes. What does that monument say about memory? It shows a woman pointing off toward Alabama's objective, calling them all to arms to free their state. But to free it from what? That's the question. Private Sam Larry of Company B of the 15th Alabama puts it this way. It's what he's fighting for. He says, "We must drive back the invader and trample on the laws that would have made slaves voyageurs, or adherents, if you will, of freedom and constitutional equality. And we must rally around the standard of our rights." Pretty obvious what he's fighting for. He continues, "The question to be decided, whether we should be slaves or free men, whether we should be branded with the stigma of rebellion, or handed down to posterity as a free and independent people." Almost prophetic. Something that we can all think about as we're walking today. What Sam Leary thought all those years ago. The question is, kind of before we leave this, before we get into the hiking part, I want you to think about this for the walk. How does memory play in to how we think about what happened here at Gettysburg? How much of what we know is based on what these people wrote much later, based on their memory, versus what they wrote immediately after? Consider it as we head on through. If everyone's ready, what we're going to do is we're going to stand on up. If you're seated, if you're already standing, excellent. We're going to cross the road. We're going to walk down the road, and we'll stop near the Bushman Farm Lane. If everyone's ready, let's head on out. All right, looks like we have everyone here. Everyone survived the first part of the walk. The easy part. I have faith in you all because I have 5th graders that do this very energetically. So I have faith that you all can complete this hike with me today.
Thank you.
So where are we at? Right now we are on Seminary Ridge. See, I almost messed that up. Seminary Ridge. Kind of the end, the south end of Seminary Ridge, on the Confederate line of battle for July 2nd and 3rd. Seems like a pretty good position. Got a little bit of shade, and you're kind of on a rise, and it's really hard to see when you're kind of just around Gettysburg that you're on this ridge line, that you're on this rise. But from here, it's pretty easy to tell that you're on a fairly good defensive position. You have a good view of 2 hills in your front, both of which we'll be exploring today in the footsteps of the 15th. But that morning of July 2nd, the 15th Alabama starts way off to our west. Colonel Oates says in his memoir, "We were ordered to cook rations and be ready to move out at 3 o'clock a.m. It was 4 o'clock when the brigade was put in motion." They're going to march, carrying their 45 pounds of gear, dressed in wool uniforms, about 25 miles in 12 hours. And they're going to show up here to Gettysburg on July 2nd and be placed into the line of battle. Now, you just marched 25 miles. Our little stint really didn't do it justice. But I'm sure that these soldiers out here are quite hungry. They're quite tired. They're exhausted from the march, from the heat. Their canteens, by the time they get here, are mostly empty. And so, Colonel Oates writes later on, "Before the advance began, 2 men from each of the 11 companies of my regiment were ordered to take all of the canteens to a well about 100 yards in our rear and fill them with cool water before we went into the fight." He then complains about officers not waiting for their men to do things. And then he says, "Before this detail could fill the canteens, the advance was ordered." Looking back from his memory, he says it would have been indefinitely better to have waited 5 minutes for those 22 men in canteens of water to have returned. And then he adds in that paragraph, "The loss of those 22 men and the lack of water contributed largely to our failure to take Little Round Top." Spoiler alert, but you've had 162 years to Google, well, 20 years to Google search it and 162 years to figure it out. These soldiers are exhausted. They get here to Gettysburg. It's warmer than it is today. They're wearing wool. They're carrying 45 pounds of gear. And now they're told to go into battle, and they are lacking their canteens. They are lacking their sources of hydration. Folks, don't try to be the 15th Alabama today. Please drink your water. Colonel William Oates, in command of that regiment. This is him. He's in his early 20s. He's an interesting character. He's kind of had a hard existence growing up. He wasn't a good kid, if you will. He was the bad boy. The bad boy, if you will. He kind of had this, well, didn't kind of. He had this squabble with a guy who was going around and scamming people. The 1800s version of scamming people. He found out about it. He got real angry. In the middle of kind of this scam, he walked out, and this guy followed him out. And he says he found a shovel on the ground. He picked it up and he whacked him with it. Now, William Oates thinks that he kills this guy. Certainly assault. But little did Oates know he didn't kill the guy. He only fractured his skull. And so Oates flees his home in southeastern Alabama, goes over to Florida first, then goes up, goes into Mississippi, and then into Louisiana, and then into Texas, when his brother, John, really beloved by William, catches up with him and says, "Listen, you're okay. Come back home." So he's going to come back home. Not quite to his home county, though, because there's still a warrant active for his arrest in his home county. Ends up turning his life around. Goes to school. He starts studying for the bar. Sits in the lawyer's office, studies, becomes an attorney. Turns his life around. This hot-headed young man becomes, a great leader of troops. A great leader in the community, and then a leader of troops. Forming his own company, and then fighting in this civil war for what he thinks is right. When he gets here to Gettysburg, he's in charge of these men from Alabama. And he is ready even if the officers didn't wait like they should have, in his opinion, to order the advance. He is ready to make the advance toward his objective. If everyone's ready, we'll head down to our next stop. All right, just as we kind of get the back of the group in there. Welcome to the Bushman Farm. As we've advanced down the trail, and because we're sticking to the trail, we're not exactly in the footsteps of the 15th. That being said, there were Confederate soldiers that moved through this area on July 2nd, 1863. The position we started on, approximately where the Alabama Monument is where the 15th started. They started there and they moved straight across down toward the Slider Farm. That's where we're going next. So we're a little bit out of the way at this stop, but this gives us the opportunity not to walk through that really tall stuff that's down there. It also gives us nice shade here in the Bushman front yard. Now the brigade as it formed up that Oates was in, it was formed up from north to south if you're looking at it on a map. 4th Alabama, 47th Alabama, 15th Alabama, 44th Alabama, 48th Alabama. That will change as we get further down into our battle walk. But their line of attack isn't exactly where we are right now. We're a little bit off. Their objective for the day, according to Oates in 1888 in his letters, he said, "I was ordered to find the left of the Union line, to turn it and do all the damage I could." Keep that in mind, those are his orders. He was ordered to find the left of the Union line and do all the damage he could. Scouting reports earlier that day had the Union line somewhere off in that direction. Scouting reports from very early that morning had noticed General Sickles' 3rd Corps moved up into the peach orchard. They hadn't noticed them move forward. So scouting reports says they should be able to go through here, sweep this end of the Union line, curl it up, and crush the United States Army here at Gettysburg, or at least that's the hope. But as Colonel Oates is moving through this area not too far behind us, moving down toward the Slider Farm, he says in his official report from August of 1863, "In my front I discovered a heavy force of the enemy." A heavy force of the enemy. His 1863 report. Think about how his memory is playing in here. Personally, I don't remember what I had for dinner last week. He's recalling this whole action where he's probably sleep deprived, dehydrated, and hot and humid and tired, and he's trying to recall all of this like 3 months later. So, a month later. If I can't figure out what I had for dinner last week, I don't know how he's doing with memory. It's pretty good though for military commanders. But he encounters a heavy force of the enemy. So because we're in for the experience, let's head down to our next stop down at the Slider Farm and see what that heavy force looks like.
Whoa.
All right, everyone, as you're coming down the road, you might have heard the enemy, or in this case, rather, Ranger Dan shooting at it in our general direction, giving us some ambiance. Thank you, Dan. Dan is one of our black powder supervisors here at the park, so he was very willing to come down and burn some powder for this walk. As Oates and his troops are coming down, they're coming down kind of behind, kind of toward us in this direction, moving right toward the group from behind the house. And as they get down into this area, Oates, he perceives that there is enemy troops down here, running around. Maybe not quite firing at him, not quite yet, but at least movement down here in the area of the Slider Farm. Somewhere here. Maybe a couple of pot shots here and there. This is a rendition by Dale Gallen. Maybe what that would have looked like. But these troops that are down here, they are not the standard members of the United States Army. They are wearing a different uniform. I always ask the kids, we have the blue and the gray But in this case, the gray, instead of running into the blue, runs into the green. The green, which is kind of just off of what we normally hear about the American Civil War. Doesn't quite agree with what we normally hear. They run into the green, the 2nd United States sharpshooters, firing into their flank. They fight a little bit irregularly. They don't fight like they are standing in a line and firing. They hide behind things. They fight kind of like in an earlier day. Like during the American Revolution, when they're fighting from behind stone walls, that's what these men do. They stand behind stone walls, they fire a couple of shots, they move on. They find a tree, they fire a couple of shots, they move on. They fight irregularly. And Oates' command, as it comes down this slope, is going to start taking fire somewhere in the vicinity here of the Slider Farm. As they move through this area, they're going to start receiving fire. And it's coming from the woods that are just beyond this field here. Oates' troops aren't initially going to take any hits. A lot of that fire directed at the other regiments in the Alabama Brigade. But as they get closer and closer, they are now becoming selected targets for these sharpshooters. Colonel Oates says, in 1905, they are in the woods, and I did not know the number of them. And then if you flipped the sides around, from the Union perspective, from the U.S. sharpshooter perspective, not until the Graycoats were within 100 yards of them did they fall back, firing as they did. Their goal, the U.S. sharpshooters' goal, is not to hold this entire piece of the Army of Northern Virginia back. That's not their goal. Their goal is to distract them. At least that's my opinion, if you will. My opinion is their ideal is to distract them. And as Oates moves up, and some of his men start taking hits from these sharpshooters from the scattered fire, and he knows that his objective is to find the Union left. Those are his orders. That means to his right, because it's very confusing if you're like me and can't quite put your finger on it all the time. If he's looking for the right, his right of the Union line, their left, and he's got troops in front of him, and they're not supposed to be there, but they're just scattered, they're sharpshooters. If he pushes them, if he drives them, if he follows them with his men from Alabama, maybe they'll lead him to the end of the Union line. And so this is what Oates is going to go with. He has to follow that order, to find the left of the Union line, turn it, do all the damage he could. Well, what he doesn't know, as I drop that, what he doesn't know is that there are troops, there are commanders that are now giving him additional orders. He doesn't know it yet. Oates is supposed to take his command to the left. But instead, Oates is moving forward, pursuing these sharpshooters, hoping that they will lead him to the end of the Union line. If we're ready, we'll continue in the pursuit of the sharpshooters. Unfortunately, I think Dan will be driving back to the visitor center, so we won't have anyone to chase after. You are really getting the authentic experience that I heard back there. Absolutely. Crawling through the woods and on the logs and over the rocks and, well, not yet, but we're getting there. At least there's a trail for that part that's hopefully clear. It was clear on Thursday, like I said.
Did we lose anybody out here, Andrew?
If you're not here, raise your hand.
Did anybody turn back? That's what
Yes, I would say that our attrition is an acceptable level here. Let's see here. Don't even need that page anymore. Yeah, all right. Well, now that we're all out of the woods, or
so to speak.
kind of, we come into this open field. Oates hits this open field. He actually mentions it in his memoir as he moves across this open space. He says, I received an order from Brigadier General Law to left wheel my regiment and move it in the direction of the heights upon my left. An order which I failed to obey. That's from 1863. In 1905, he remembers it this way. He says, I did not halt, but looked to the rear for the 48th Alabama and saw it going under General Law's orders across the rear of our line and to the left. It was said to reinforce the Texas Brigade, which was hotly engaged. That left no one in my rear or on my right to meet this foe. He's still talking about those men in green, those sharpshooters. He pulls that line pretty much from 1863 from his report. He says, the two regiments on my right were moved by the left flank across my rear, which threw me on the extreme right of the whole line, the extreme right of the Army of Northern Virginia. The sharpshooters are now in a running battle with the Alabamians. As the Alabamians come up through this area, sharpshooters are stopping, taking a pot shot, firing, falling back. Oates is chasing, giving chase to them. He said it was here that Lieutenant Colonel Isaac Fagan, a most excellent and gallant officer, received a severe wound in the right knee, which caused him to lose his leg. He writes that in 1863. Privates Kennedy of Company B and Trimner of Company G were killed at this point, and Private Spencer of Company D severely wounded. So they're starting to take casualties from this fire that these sharpshooters are putting into them. But General Law wants his men to move to Little Round Top. Move to the left. He orders Oates to do so. But Oates says in 1905, there was great difficulty in accomplishing the maneuver at that moment, as the regiment on my left was running into my regiment. In the event that I had obeyed the order, I should have come into contact with the regiment on my left and also exposed my right flank to an enfilading fire from the enemy. I therefore continued to press forward. So instead of following the orders to move to the left, he, along with the 47th, is going to keep pushing straight up in that direction, the direction we're heading, following those sharpshooters. He said, I knew it would do no good to leave that force. I knew not how strong in our rear with no troops of ours to take care of them. He writes in 1905. So I gave the command to change direction to the right, the opposite of the orders that he had received. So he'll continue pushing his regiment forward when the rest of the brigade begins to swing over to the left. If everyone's ready for the next, hopefully slightly easier part of the rock to the nenext stop.
Andrew, does the 47th go with them at that point?
They are. Okay. So the 47th is, well, it has another commanding officer. The 47th falls, or is supposed to fall, underneath the command of Oates for this second part of the march, if you will. Now, does the commander of the 47th know that, is the question. And the answer is, in my opinion, is probably not.
Who's leading the regiment?
Colonel.
The colonel?
Bolger, yes, Colonel Bolger. Lieutenant Colonel Bolger, I believe. All right. Had someone tell me I'm giving Troy Harmon a run for his money. I don't know about that. So I'm out here for 6 hours. I don't know if I'll be able to do that.
Well, that's a good compliment no matter how it comes.
It is. Troy was an excellent interpreter when he retired this last year, year before last, but he is an excellent interpreter.
What's he doing now?
I don't know. It's a great question.
Yeah.
How many people went to the canteens?
Huh?
How many people went to the canteens?
22, according to Oates.
What happened? They couldn't catch up?
They couldn't catch up.
Okay.
And they got
captured
Oh, okay.
when they didn't find the right people.
Wasn't there like a wagon that they saw that they might want to...
We'll get to that,
Okay.
that part. Yeah, we're getting there. Yep.
Okay. Let me stop. You described that as having been an open field.
It was.
Set up in crops.
I'm not sure if it was crops or if it was just a meadow. I'm not sure on.
Not a lot of meadow.
All right, well, I can't really see the back of the group. Oh, I have a message from... Okay.
Andrew, you got to get a higher elevation. We'll see them then.
Well, see, I frankly, if I think I start talking from here, probably it will go down the hill.
Took a shortcut. Maintenance is en route. We're going to try and fix it before our way back.
Excellent. For those of you who didn't hear that on the back end, maintenance is en route to the tree. Hopefully, if you have to hike back with me, it'll be out of the way by then. Well,
We could take the long way on the road if we had to.
all right, so as we're heading up this hill on this trail, which hopefully won't have any downed trees on it, we are taking the route that was, in my estimation, put in by probably the WPA during the 1930s. So this is a little bit easier than what Oates faced on July 2nd. He said this, he said, the sharpshooters retreated up the south front of the mountain. He says this in 1905. Pursued by my command. In places, the men had to climb up, catching to the rocks and the bushes and crawling over the boulders in the face of fire from the enemy, who kept retreating. They were taking shelter and firing down on us from behind rocks and crags, which covered the side of the mountain thicker than gravestones in a city cemetery. Fortunately, they usually overshot us. We could see our foe only as they dodged back and forth from one boulder to another. Hence our fire was scattered. When we get up a little higher, we're going to start seeing what he's talking about. That being said,
You didn't say anything about trees.
the hill was wooded. But I couldn't tell you how many of those trees were down over his path of advance. As we go up the trail, Oates says, some of my men fainted from heat, exhaustion, and thirst. Please don't become one of those casualties. Keep drinking your water as we continue up to the top of the hill. Up there we'll be taking about a 5-minute rest before continuing on.
Andrew, we are here.
All right, I saw a couple more kind of wandering in, so I didn't want to give them their fair share of just a little breather.
I was in the rear, so.
All right. You've done it, everyone. You've conquered the tree, which is being cut up right now if you listen for the chainsaw. Now you've conquered Big Round Top. Colonel Oates had conquered Big Round Top on July 2nd after marching 24 miles with his men wearing wool uniforms in higher heat without any canteens. Please drink your water on this hike. The woodlands back then would have been a little bit different. I've been talking about this with a few people up here in the front of the group. But this was more of a managed woodland back then, if you would. So what that means is there were grazing animals that came up and ate all of this stuff out. And so you had a clearer line of sight, even though this was still forested up here. So when these soldiers are coming up here, and plus it's July, it's August now, so it's a lot thicker than it would be in July anyway. These soldiers have a little bit of a better view than we do today. Colonel Oates writes, Colonel Strawson of the 2nd United States Sharpshooters.
Is there any room up there? Move people over, can't hear you.
Yep. There's room.
Come on up.
Which way are they calling from? That way?
I'll also increase my volume.
Oh yeah, you don't have a speaker on your belt.
Huh?
Sometimes you guys have speakers over there.
No.
They all took the long way.
Colonel Oates says in a letter in 1888, when over halfway up, your fire ceased. This is a letter to the United States sharpshooters. Commander Colonel Strawson. He said, when you were over halfway up, your fire ceased, and henceforth to the top I did not see one of your men. And then Oates writes in 1905 about getting up here, he says, I halted and let them lie down and rest a few minutes. That's what we just did. My right lay exactly where the observatory now stands, and the line extended down the slope westward. Let me deconstruct that a second. You know those observation towers that are kind of spotted around? There used to be one of those on top of this hill.
Wow.
And the tower base, one of the 4 tower bases, is just over here on the left side of the trail. It's a big stone thing that definitely doesn't look like it belongs. So to give you some perspective, this is where Oates is saying his men are. The end of his line is on top of this hill. He said, I saw Gettysburg through the foliage of the trees. A little bit thinner back then. I saw the smoke and heard the roar of battle, which was then raging at Devil's Den, in the peach orchard, up the Emmitsburg Road, and on the west and south of the Little Round Top. I saw from the highest point of rocks that where we were then was the most commanding elevation in that neighborhood. I knew that my men were too much exhausted to make a good fight without a few minutes rest. There's a lot of stuff in that quote. First of all, it's the evidence that he's up here where we're standing. We are in the footsteps of the 15th Alabama on top of this hill. They were ordered to go that way to attack Little Round Top, but instead they followed those United States sharpshooters up to this hill. They were crawling as we were underneath trees. They were crawling over boulders and fallen logs. They were holding on to branches, pulling themselves up this hill under fire. And by the time they get about 3/4 of the way up, those sharpshooters disappear. And they pull themselves up to the top of this hill. And the sharpshooters aren't here. They've gone off somewhere. And Oates gets up here and he says, let's take a breather, everybody, before we move. Or does he want to move? He continues in 1905. About 5 minutes after I halted, Captain Terrell, Assistant Adjutant General to General Law, rode up on a horse by the only pathway on the southeast side of the mountain and inquired why it had halted. I told him. He then informed me that General Hood was wounded. Law was in command of the division and sent me his compliments. Said for me to press on, turn the Union left, and captured Little Round Top, and if possible, to lose no time. Colonel Oates, when he gets up here, looks around, has better line of sight than we do today. In 1905, as he recalls it, he says, I got up there and I wanted to turn this hill into a Gibraltar, a strong fortress of rock, referring to that rock on the south of Spain that's still owned by the British to this day. Into a fortress. This is the commanding ground. This is the high ground. This is, in his opinion, strategically significant. But he is ordered by his commanding officer, no, attack the end of the Union line. Find the Union left and turn it just as your initial orders had stated, and do as much damage as you can. So as Oates is on top of this hill with his men taking a 5-minute break as we are, he has to deliver that sorry news to his command, who is now like all of you. who probably read for this program and saw that we were going to end on Little Round Top and realized that we're on the top of Big Round Top. And thought, oh no,
So there's magic.
just like all those men back then, we're on the wrong hill. Colonel Oates climbed the wrong hill. So now, Colonel Oates has to get all of these exhausted people, turn them around, and head them north into that valley, into the saddle between the two hills, and attack the Union flank. Attack the Union left. So,
And there's other units that are already attacking Little Round Top right now.
that's correct. Little Round Top's already engaged.
Yeah,
We got 2 more regiments. Not only is the 15th up here, but the 47th is on the slope just below, sticking with Oates. So you have 2 regiments from Alabama up here.
more what ifs.
Now they have to attack down the hill. As they did, we are about to head back down the hill. We're not going all the way to the bottom. Just before the stairs that we came up by the parking lot, there's a trail that breaks to the right. That's the big, if you're familiar with it, it's the Big Round Top Nature Trail. We're going down that trail. There's 2 monuments down there. One's a metal one. It's to the 11th Pennsylvania Reserve. That is the next stop. Take your time going down the main trail. It is rocky. The rocks are loose. Make sure you're drinking water. Stay hydrated. I want everyone to stay safe on this program. If you're ready, let's head on out. I know we have a couple more people that are kind of still coming down the hill. Thank you to the Boy Scout troop that is here. I've assigned one of your scouts to manage the intersection, the trail junction. Good work, Scouts. All right. We're going to be here for a few minutes anyway.
I just had a question. We were talking about it a few minutes ago, but we've been here for 2 or 3 days and see all these amazing walls, stone walls everywhere. How many of those are original and how many were reconstruction, and any idea?
So the majority of them are reconstructed. That being said, the materials are original. The soil around here, when farmers, even today, because we're very agricultural here in Adams County, even today when farmers plow, they come up with tons of rocks. And what they end up doing, at least back then, is they would just chuck them off to the side, and it became kind of their field boundary or their property boundary.
Why haul it farther than you have to? You just put it at the edge of your field.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you ended up with stone fences.
Yeah.
So a lot of our fences here are restacked. They did that a couple of times. They've been working on that more recently again, but it seems in the 50-ish kind of year range they tend to restack the stone walls. But I know that so we had during World War II there was a German POW camp here on the battlefield, and they used the POWs to restack the stone walls. That being said, the CCC also worked on that project, and many of folks since then. So you'll see some walls on the battlefield that are much nicer than others. All right, as we're getting the back end of our group in here, I did forget one quote when we were on top of the hill, but I think it'll play in just as well down here. Oates said in 1905, "My conviction was of the importance of holding and occupying Big Round Top with artillery, which I endeavored to communicate through law through Thoreau. I consider it my duty to obey the order communicated to me by Thoreau, whom I knew to be a trustworthy and gallant officer. But to move then was against my better judgment." Off the top of Big Round Top.
Thus the name of the title of this walk.
Yes, the title of the walk. I almost forgot to mention the quote with the title in it. So as Oates comes down this hill, he's coming through a much clearer landscape than we did. And he's not coming down the way we came down. He's coming down through the woodside, heading down toward Little Round Top, which is just over in that direction. If you made it with me this far, you are very near the end point of this hike. So, well, yeah, unless you're parked at the start point. So while they're descending, Oates writes this in 1905. He says, while descending in the rear of Vincent's Spur, in plain view was the Federal wagon trains. And less than 300 yards distant was an extensive park of Federal ordnance wagons, which satisfied me then that we were in their rear. Oates thinks he's done it. Not only has he found the end of the Union line potentially, here's the firing off to his left, but he is gone behind them. They have outflanked the Union Army, just as they intended to do. In 1863, he writes in his official report, on reaching the foot of the mountain, I found that the enemy was in heavy force, posted in rear of large rocks upon a slight elevation, beyond a depression some 300 yards in width. You can't see that right now because of the trees. But if it were open here, you could look right through the trees and see what he's talking about. In 1905, he wrote, I saw no enemy until within 40 or 50 steps of an irregular ledge of rocks. From behind this ledge, unexpectedly to us, because concealed, they poured into us the most destructive fire I ever saw. Our line halted but did not break. Let's flip back to 1863. He says, I engaged them, firing 2 or 3 rounds. I discovered that the enemy were giving way in my front. I ordered a charge. The enemy in my front fled, but that portion of his line confronting the 2 companies on my left held their ground and continued a most galling fire upon my left. How is memory working in here? How is this all coming about? Let's go from here. We're going to follow along the right side of the road. We're going to cross Wright Avenue. As we're doing this, you are in the footsteps of the 15th Alabama. Think about the terrain. Think about what they're doing as we're making this walk. Think about doing it under fire on that hot day in July, having marched all those miles without any water, having climbed this hill, having come back down, and now you're being shot at again. And your goal is to take that position. And then when we get into it, we're going to flip it around, and you're going to see it from the 20th Maine's point of view. If everyone's ready, let's go ahead and make that walk to our last stop. And now you've come up onto Little Round Top, the place where Oates was supposed to attack that first time. You've ended up on the left, the extreme left of the Union line. You've switched roles. You've gone from being in the footsteps of the 15th Alabama to being in the footsteps of the 20th Maine. Let's see here. I do have a... am I on the wrong side? Nope, I'm not. Colonel Chamberlain, Joshua Chamberlain, in charge of this regiment. I have his picture somewhere, but I have a feeling that he's probably a familiar face. There we go. That guy. Colonel Chamberlain said, I perceived a heavy force in the rear of their principal line. That's the 15th. Moving rapidly but stealthily toward our left, with the intention, as I judged, of gaining our rear unperceived. I had the right wing move by the left flank. There's a lot of military gargly goop, here it goes. Extending so far as to cover the whole front, then engaged. And at the same time, move the left wing to the left rear, making a large angle at the color, which was now brought to the front where our left had first rested. They say that angle, the angle of the line, is where the monument is now. So that marker. So that is where they say, or at least years later, that's where they say the angle, that turn in the line is. Oates in 1905 says this: "I again ordered the advance. Knowing the officers and men of that gallant old regiment, I felt sure that they would follow their commander anywhere in the line of duty. I passed through the line waving my sword, shouting, 'Forward, men, to the ledge!' The question is, could anybody hear him?
Right.
Over all of that musketry. The 20th Maine describes the attacks on their line this way: "Again and again this mad rush was repeated, the charges of the 15th, each time to be beaten off by the ever-thinning line that desperately clung to its ledge of rock. Colonel Oates himself advanced close to our lines at the head of his men, and at times the hostile forces were actually at hand-to-hand distance. Twice the rebels will follow down the slope so sharply that they were obliged to use the bayonet, and in places small squads of their men in their charges reached our front. The front surged backward and forward like a wave on the ocean." As the monument dedication for the 20th Maine. What Oates is doing in this time is that he makes this advance, kind of moving around to our left, kind of behind us. And they're advancing up the hill, attacking, being thrown back. The 20th Maine, having three, at least according to the reports I read, had 3 ledges. The landscape today on this portion of the field, well, what the Cultural Landscape Report, the government document that talks about this, the historicity of the landscape here, says the core area is preserved. But that's something that's over and over again in that document. It goes, the core area of the 20th Maine is as it was. The core area this. The problem is that there's a road back there, an old road called Chamberlain Avenue. And when they put that road in, these ledges that these 20th Maine men were fighting from, as they're fighting in this V sort of formation, facing that way, backing up upon, those ledges were probably detonated in order to make the roadbed for that road. So that is gone. The landscape here is changed. Let's see if I can find my spot here in all my pages. As Oates yells, "Forward, men, to the ledge," they make it up. It becomes hand-to-hand combat. Oates, in his map that he drew of the battle afterward from memory, says that the 20th Maine falls back on themselves. There's an account that says the commander of the 83rd Pennsylvania, the next regiment up, sends a messenger to Chamberlain and asks him, "Have you retreated?" Because they are now getting shot from the rear. They're taking casualties from these Alabamians coming up this hill and crushing Chamberlain's men. And as the attack subsides, Chamberlain says this: "Our gallant withered line shrunk before fire it could not repel. It was too evident that we could maintain the defenses no longer. As a less desperate resort, I ordered a charge." Chamberlain's pretty famous. I'm going to guess that this guy's a little less famous. This is Ellis Spear of the 20th Maine. He's one of Chamberlain's subordinates. He says, "I heard a shout on the center of forward and saw the line and the colors begin to move. I had received no orders other than to hold the left and guard the flank, and I did not understand the meaning of the movement. We all joined in the shouts in the movement and went in a rush down the slope and over the boulders." What's going on with Oates? Because all of this is happening very, very quickly. Oates writes in his 1863 after-action report I discovered that the enemy had flanked me on the right, and 2 regiments moving rapidly upon my rear not more than 200 yards distant. When to save my regiment from capture or destruction, I ordered a retreat. How's memory playing in? Do you see the differences in their accounts? Oates says, I ordered the retreat. But Chamberlain says he moved his men forward. And Spear says, well, I don't know if Chamberlain ordered us forward, but we went forward anyway, and that's what's going on. So there's all sorts of kind of remembrance of what's going on here. Ellis continues this way. He says, then we discovered, as they're moving down the line, that Captain Morrell and Company B of the 20th Maine plus the 2nd United States sharpshooters, remember them from earlier, had been firing upon the enemy from their rear. Company B had been sent back by Chamberlain earlier in the attack. Well, they're supposed to go off and kind of skirmish, kind of scout a little bit. They got separated and they ended up in a fence line that's back here on the edge of this wood line. The Alabamians had, unknowns to themselves, moved in between the 20th Maine and their Company B. So they had Union soldiers on both sides of them. Captain Morrell wrote this in 1863. He said, we took position behind a stone wall. The enemy appeared, and about the time your regiment had charged them, we opened fire on them. Talking to Chamberlain. Giving loud commands in order to have them think that I had a large body of troops. So Company B opens fire. The sharpshooters open fire into the back of the Confederates who are coming up this side of the hill. And they give shouts and calls and orders to try to deceive Oates into thinking that there's more men back there than there was. Does their ploy work? What did Oates say? He said, I discovered that the enemy had flanked me on the right with 2 regiments rather than just a company. He said that in 1863. I'm going to say the deception was fairly successful. As Oates retreats, he falls back. He writes in 1905, my dead and wounded were then nearly as great in number as those still on duty. They literally covered the ground. The blood stood in puddles. In some places on the rocks, the ground was soaked with blood as brave men as ever fell on the red field of battle. My loss, as near now can be ascertained, is as follows, 1863. 17 killed upon the field, 54 wounded and brought off the field, 90 missing, most of whom were either killed or wounded. Among the killed and wounded are 8 officers, most of whom were very gallant and efficient men, including his younger brother John, the one who brought him home, reformed him, the one he cared for as a brother most deeply can. He is going to be killed on the backside of this hill. Recapitulation of his losses: 17 killed, 54 wounded, 90 missing, total 161 casualties. 15th Alabama. How does memory play into this? We know from multiple accounts that the 20th Maine moved forward. We know that Oates in 1863 wrote that he ordered the retreat. But in his memoir, he wanted people to know that he was in command of his men. Think about how potentially changing the narrative could benefit either side, in our view, looking back on them. Memory's a hard thing. Do either of these commanders benefit from changing the narrative back 150 years ago? That's the question. And I'm not going to answer it. I'm going to let you answer it. But Oates said this at the end of his memoir. He said, I waited until the next charge of the 20th Maine was repulsed, as it would have given my men a better chance to get out unhurt. and then ordered the retreat. The historian of that regiment, the 20th Maine, claims that its charge drove us from the field. This is not true. I ordered the retreat. Colonel Chamberlain also reported it and doubtless believed it, but it was just as I state. I ordered the retreat. I'll let you all think about it. What did he have to gain? Why would he have done that? What does that say about the memory that we look at here, that we experience on this battlefield? How we understand what happened here, how we look at historical documents. Research is key. You have to look at multiple sources in order to pull this material together into a semi-coherent narrative. If you can figure out everything, well, it just wouldn't be as fun as a researcher. That being said, we have a pretty good idea of what happened up here. We know that some of that history, because of the commemoration of this battle, because of the use of this hill with the Tor Road of Chamberlain Avenue, with Wright Avenue, and with Sykes? I have to look it up. Anyway, the road that goes up Little Round Top, we know that these changed. They changed the landscape here. These veterans come back and they tour the battlefield 50 years afterward, and they come here to a battlefield where the landscape has significantly changed so that they can tour it. How does that affect their memory of what happened on those days? These are all open-ended questions, folks. Feel free to take them as they are. But this ground, what they did here, the sacrifice of the men from the 15th Alabama who then retreated back up Big Round Top, down the other side, back toward the Slider Farm. The men of the 20th Maine pushed them down this hill and then semi-pursued them up to the top of Big Round Top where they're going to rest for the night. That monument, their main monument, we saw that up, the main monument up there on the hill. This memory of what goes on here. It's good to remember the losses, the sacrifice of these soldiers. Something I always tell the kids. It's easy for us in this time to look back and look at black and white photos and not think of them as humans. I go in the National Cemetery on tours, I go in there and I listen to people and they don't know what those white markers mean. They have no idea what they are. But each one of them is an individual human life that sacrificed so that we all could be here today. Each one of these soldiers doing the best of their duty, fighting for what they believed in to make what is possible today. Us being out here on a beautifully preserved piece of ground, enjoying some nice 70-degree weather after a break from that hot spell. To come out here and try to better understand these men, their motivations, what they saw, what they heard, what they smelled, and then finally, afterwards, the ones who came back years later, the ones who thought about it, the ones who it haunted their dreams and their nightmares for years to come, are able to see this place that caused those memories, be able to appreciate it for what it is, and be able to better understand these men through the experiences that they lived. Folks, thank you all so much for coming out on this walk. Thank you for bearing with me through all of this, the fallen trees, the Big Round Top, the entire thing. I will be walking back with you the same way that I came, but if you parked up here, good on you. But thank you all, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Is there a 15th Alabama monument?
There isn't. Just a brigade marker and a state monument.
Okay.
A lot of the Confederate units don't get individual monuments. They just end up with say a brigade marker, division marker, and then the state markers as well. Well, not that so much. It was that this is a battlefield in northern state, and
Yeah, right. It's Pennsylvania.
It's expensive, and they didn't really want the Confederates, especially immediately after the battle, to have that recognition as the same as, I can't put it gently, they didn't want traitors to have the same recognition as United States soldiers on a northern battlefield.
Was Oates or Chamberlain more consistent?
The latest one.
That's a great question.
Or inconsistent?
They were both inconsistent.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Chamberlain's kind of one of those guys who, he's kind of like the fisherman, right? So he's like a fisherman's story. So every time he tells his account over the years, the fish, you know, just his role in the action, it just gets slightly more. And by the time he passes away in the early 1900s, I have to look up what year he died. I think it's the 19-teens. He's one of the more or less older surviving people that was in this fight. So he, you know, he told the fisherman's story, which got slightly larger every time he told it. That being said, Oates communicates in depth with Colonel Chamberlain to try to figure out his own, kind of wrestle with his own demons about this fight, what he could have done better, what he did do, as opposed to Chamberlain, what he did do. So they go back and forth, which is really interesting. And Chamberlain has he's kind of big in early battlefield preservation, and I held a couple of my pictures back because I had them specifically for questions. The question is, if I held them back in my line of pictures, can I find them? There's a great picture of, and it's from Ranger Dan Welch, who was very helpful. Yeah. This is a lost photograph. This is from an online copy. This is supposedly, it's colorized. This is the 20th Maine battle flag, planted where the Monument Commission thought the flag was planted during the battle. Approximately where the monument is there. That's the thought. Now, this is from a descendant. So, it was originally scheduled to be on one of the waysides up here on Little Round Top, but that wayside was never put in. So this, and what's interesting is when you look in the background, look how different the terrain looks.
Right. Yep.
As opposed to now. And on the photo description, it says that the rock in the center background is called the Oates Rock, the one where he got up and yelled for his men to charge into the back of the Union line, supposedly in the middle of the photograph there. So that's the story anyway. That's the story that goes along with that photograph. Wow. The only other ones that kind of came in that same packet, if you will, from Ranger Dan as a backup, and like I said, I'm a constant page flipper. I'm never able to find anything ever. It goes for all of my. Oh, there it is. It goes for all of my programs. Where these photos of Ellis Spear, that's who the descendant was of, that gentleman from the 20th Maine. And this is him looking at the newly placed 20th Maine monument from down kind of below Chamberlain Avenue. And that's like his back view looking up at it. But if you go down there in the roadbed and try to match this up, it isn't an easy match because the geography, the terrain is different. And you can see it in the flip of the image with him flipped around. You can see it even a little bit better.
That's awesome.
So he is
wow. Now, was William able to find and recover his brother's body at the time, or is it too sketchy?
That's a great question. I don't know.
Because he had to have known, like, once
they came back,
he's gone.
Yeah. I don't know if he saw him go down. I don't know if he came back to do a recovery on. I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah. Since there's a lot
Could
of
he be on the Elliott?
Can you point out where the company B path is?
Yeah, it's kind of down. Well, they've redesigned the trails.
I haven't been here since they redesigned.
Yeah, he could be.
Yeah, I haven't been back there since they redesigned. Down here on the Chamberlain Avenue, there should just split to the left. If it's not there, then it's just on Wright Avenue to the left.
Another horse trail path down there, I think.
Yeah.
Off of that.
Yeah, I'm not. Let's see here. Let's see if Ranger Emily knows. Ranger Emily, come down here a second.
Front and center.
Great job, Andrew.
Thank you.
That's wonderful stuff that I caught.
Good. Do you know where the 20th B marker is? Like what trail to take?
There's a trail.
Whenever you go to the parking lot, I think there's one that goes
Yeah.
that direction. And I've never walked the full thing.
Yeah, kind of down the road and to the left. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, if you're interested, just go down. You can't miss it. It's right there on the left, and it's a straight tile back. And they built a wall back there. It's really cool. You need to, and there's a marker back there too.
Yeah, there'll be a marker back.
Yep. It's really cool. You need, if you've never seen it, you really need to see that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome job.
Good to see you again.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks. Take care. Thank you for coming.